Yesterday, we discussed the tenet of Jewish belief that God is aware of all our thoughts and our actions. Nothing in existence happens only because God wills it should happen. And because that function only could take place only due to God's willing it, therefore there is nothing that he doesn't know, whether it's action, thought, or any nuance of anything, because it only exists because he wills it should exist in the context that it does exist. This tenet is a prerequisite, is a pre to the next one. And this is really the objective of creation. There's a very fundamental question which is asked: why did God create existence? If God is perfect on an absolute level, because God is infinite, and there's nothing lacking, so the whole concept of need connotes lack. But if there's lack, that means you have to advance. Advance means that it's not complete. That if God is infinite and there's nothing outside of him, you can't add to him. So why did God create? The concept is God had no need to create a world. So why did he create a world? Why did he create a human being, which is the center of the universe, which is the objective of creation? This composite of physical, spiritual, the soul being integrated and unified with the body. And we have this struggle from the moment we're born till we die. Who has the upper hand? Does the physical dictate? Does the spiritual dictate? Are we influenced by the physicality of life, and therefore we see life through a colored lens? Or do we have a level of objectivity which the mind, the perspective, the objective actually dictates and rules? And that's the challenge of life. But what's the point of it? It has this objective. So the Ramchal, Rabbi Luzzatto, the Rambam, also in the Laws of Tshuva, speaks about this, that man was endowed with free will. The only species in existence that has free will is the human being. Every other living entity, organism, whatever it may be, its function is purely based on its DNA makeup. It's all instinctive. Any species, whatever exists in existence, it functions exactly as it does because that is its DNA, and therefore instinctively it behaves exactly as it's meant to behave. It's programmed, and it can't behave differently. A human being, although there's certain aspects of our lives that we have no control over, and we must. A person doesn't breathe by choice. We naturally breathe. Our heart beats. The blood pulsates through our body. Circulation is natural. That's just the reality of our life. But we do have choice. God forbid a person could cause himself to stop breathing. It means ending his life, or many other things. But we have choice at every level. We have choice. And we're endowed with choice. Why? Because if it is only, the action is only due and attributed to the initiative of the human being, which he was endowed with the ability to make the choice. The only reason why the good deed came about was because the person chose to take the initiative to bring that about. Otherwise, it wouldn't have come about. As a result of that, the person is fully worthy and deserving of that end result because it's only attributed to that person's initiative. And even when we do the right thing, we can do the right thing for many reasons. We can do the right thing for the sake of doing what's right. You can do the right thing with an ulterior motive. You can do the right thing selflessly, purely for the sake of God's glory. All these various contributions to the action or motivation for the action will determine what the quality of that action is, what its value is, but all that contribution is determined and initiated by one's choice. That's the choice we're given, and that's within the, what we call the toolbox of choice of affecting something on many levels to bring it to the ultimate level. But God forbid, if a person chooses to do the wrong thing, which is not compelled to do the wrong thing, so the wrong thing only came about, what you want to call the transgression, the infraction, only because he took the initiative to do what's wrong. So the wrong only came about, what we call the sin, the transgression, only due to the person drawing upon his ability of choice to initiate the negative rather than the positive. So if the negative only exists because he chose to bring it about, so that negative is attributed to the person. Therefore, that person is culpable for bringing about that negative. And also, why did he do the negative? Did he do it defiantly? Did he do it because due to his lust for whatever that may be? Was he caught up? Was it just a momentary, impulsive reaction? All that plays into the realm of choice, to what degree he has liability for that action, which is considered negative. But again, the tenet which precedes this tenet of reward and punishment is God has to be aware of every action, every thought, to be able to make an exact evaluation of what you deserve, positive or negative. Reward and punishment. But getting back to the question, if God is infinite, which indicates he has no need, there's nothing lacking. So why did God create an existence? Why did he create the human being? To be deserving or to be culpable? Of course, he doesn't want man to be culpable. The main thrust and emphasis, he should be deserving of something exceptionally special and good. But why? I'd mentioned the name of the Ramak, Rosh Deviro. The work is called Toma Dvora, the palm tree of Dvora. He writes over there that in the Zohar, there's Kabbalistic writings, God is referred to as the disgraced king. Melech Aluv, a disgraced king. Why is God disgraced? So he explains the reason why God created the human being and endowed him with choice so that he should be a beneficiary of all the good deeds that he does, as we just explained. Of course, the good only comes about due to the person taking initiative to bring about the good. If a person would naturally do good, and he had no choice but to do good, that's the way God would have created him. The action is not attributed to the person because the person had no choice but to do good. It's not a choice. Now, to be accredited for good, the reason why, because you could have remained passive and not do good, or not only that, you could have actually perpetrated evil. To what degree? Let's say as good as you could bring about good, as perfect as you could do the perfect act, you could bring about something in the negative to the same extreme, extremely negative. So based on the balance between good and evil, it depends what the parameters of good and evil is. What are those parameters? What are they? So God allows the person to have free choice, to have ability, to literally glorify God's name at the ultimate level. But God also gives the person the ability to disgrace God's name at the most extreme level of disgrace. Because if man would not have that choice, the value of the good doesn't have that same value. It's only because it's a counterbalance to what he's able to do negative. If he could have gone negative and he chose to go positive, that gives the good greater value. Although I could have done to the antithesis of what good is, I chose to do the ultimate good. So to the degree that you could go do negative, that gives value to the positive in that same context. So could you imagine? God gives a human being the ability to procreate. And now there are parameters or the areas which are permitted, you're not permitted. Adultery is not permitted. Incest is not permitted. It's not permitted. Let's say a person chooses to commit adultery, God forbid, or commit incest, God forbid. When he's committing that act of adultery, why does he have that sexual function to be able to bring about that act which is classified as evil? Because God wills that he should have that function. But that function that God is willing is everything contrary to his will, and it brings about a result that God doesn't want that result. It generates an evil, the most extreme level of impurity within existence, which is contrary to his will. But God gives that person the ability to do even that. A person wants, God forbid, to take a knife and plunge it into someone else's heart. Now, why does the person have the power in his hand to lift that weapon and penetrate somebody else's chest with that weapon and kill him? Because God gives him that power. That if he chooses to be a murderer, God allows him to be the murderer and empowers him to be the murderer because that is his choice. And God gives that person that choice because when he chooses not to do and suppresses those feelings and invests it in something positive, that positive takes on a new level of value. Now you understand what God's a disgraced God, that a human being is able to disgrace God and bring him into the equation to have God empower him to bring about that level of disgrace. All that lies within the context of free choice. And therefore, when you do the good deed, at whatever level, you're fully deserving of whatever it is, because it's only due to your own initiative. And when you do, God forbid, the wrong thing, what we classify as sin, transgression, infraction, whatever way you want to classify it, it's only due because you chose to do that. And whatever was infused in that action, that infusion is your infusion. Therefore, you have full culpability and liability for every nuance of that action that you brought about. Why did God create existence? Getting back to the original question. God has no needs. God is perfect on the absolute level. So the Ramchal writes, Rabbi Luzzatto writes, that when we speak about good, God is good on the absolute level, which we can't even relate to what it is, as we can't relate to what infinite is. Something that is good does good. Even a person is truly a good person, not that it's comparable to any degree. And a person who's a good person He wants to do good things, tell people, to better other people's lives. That's what he wants to do. Is it because he has a need? Well, every human being has needs. It gives him a sense of satisfaction. So that adds to him. That experience is a positive experience. With God, it's not an experience. God does good because he is good. Because God does good. Because God is the source of all goodness. Man, if he succeeds and achieves what God wants him to achieve, he's worthy of relationship with God, which is the ultimate goodness. And to be a beneficiary of the ultimate goodness, it has to come about through your own initiative, because just as God himself, in his essence, is not dependent on anything, there's no cause and effect regarding God, because God stands independent of everything. Your good action, which came about to be the closest, to bring about that level of commonality and compatibility, has to also come about independent of any outside influence, meaning you're not compelled to do it. But rather, it was your own initiative why you did it, because you chose to do the good. So by doing that through your own initiative, which is what we call free choice, you're actually creating a resemblance, a commonality to what God is himself. Therefore, the relationship is a more secure relationship, because the greater the commonality, the greater the compatibility. Because the person possesses a characteristic which has a semblance. And when I say the word semblance, it's the word infinitesimal is not enough of a word to use. A semblance of what God is. Because you acted in a godly manner. Because you acted in a godly manner, therefore, you have relevance to God. Therefore, you could be a beneficiary of the ultimate goodness, is what we call it reward. And the more selflessly you do it, rather than through self-interest as ulterior motive, the more that it's removed from that physicality. So again, the likeness is more like. And the closer the likeness, the greater you could be the beneficiary of that goodness. There's a question which is asked by the Ramchal in one of his works. Usually when you have an artisan, got to be an artist, Rembrandt, Picasso, any of these people, when they create that masterpiece, the painting, it reflects their ability and their genius. And the person creates what he creates to his best ability. If God is infinite, the world, relative to what God is capable of doing, is considered not so impressive. So why did God create such a limited world? The human being, he's a limited being. God should have created a human being who has unlimited ability. Let's talk about what is the objective of creation. For God to show who he is, or that man should be a beneficiary, and what's in the best interest of this new composite called physical spiritual. I'm giving you what I'm quoting the Ramchal's words, Rabbi Luzzato's words. God did not create creation to show you his ability. His ability is infinite. If he wanted, he wills existence, he goes and evolves infinitely. But that's not the purpose of creation. It's to create a context for man to be the playing field for the human being for 60 years, 70 years, 80 years, 100 years, to make choices. And all the systems that exist within this existence are in sync with allowing those choices to be made. And if you succeed, then your life has that special value. As it says, it's only a pass-through to the world to come. If God forbid you fail, so again, it has here whatever is needed to succeed or fail. And what is the objective? The objective is the human being, not God showing who he is. I always give the example. You have a Nobel Prize winner in physics, and he has one of a kind of an IQ. And he has his first child, and the child is 3 months old. And he comes home and he gets down on the floor and he babbles with the child and plays with the child. And doesn't say an intelligible word when he speaks to the child. And he's smiling and gurgling with the child. A person walks in, they say, this man really must be retarded. His intelligence never developed beyond a 3-month-old child. But they don't understand. The father of this child, who has this ingenious IQ and a person of great accomplishment, he's interacting with his 3-month-old child. How do you interact with a 3-month-old child? Getting down, not saying an intelligible word, articulating anything as it was, just purely making sounds. Lahavdil, that's God. What God is able to do, it's infinite. It's a creation which is not to be fathomed, as this creation cannot be fathomed, but it's beyond. It's only for man's welfare and best interest to address the objective that man should achieve his own level of perfection within the context of a human being and ultimately be a beneficiary of the relationship with God. No more than that. So God's purpose is not to show who he is, but to provide what's necessary for man to meet his challenge. And if he should make the right choice, he will be the beneficiary of his success. That's what it's all about. Now we're ready to read the tenet. An imamim bemud shleimo. Shabori yisborach shmo gomel tov l'shomrei mitzvosav. God pays with goodness to those who observe his commandments. Umanish lo'ovri mitzvosav. And he punishes those who transgress his dictates, his commandments. Those who observe and are committed to his commandments, they will be rewarded. He will give them tov, goodness. And he will punish those who violate his mitzvos. Again, he's using gomel tov. God rewards with goodness. Now, what's goodness? And what's punishing those who transgress his dictates, his commandments? We mentioned that the Torah says explicitly that if a person is truly evil, which only God knows what it is, to what degree, Mishalem l'sonov v'aponav lavido, God pays off his enemies in this world. So when he leaves this existence, he goes into the oblivion. There's no human being, or very rarely, who didn't do a good deed in his life. So if you did something good in your life, you have to be rewarded. Which is the ultimate location to be rewarded, the world to come. Because there, it's eternal. And there, it's ongoing. And it's a whole different dimension of reward. In the material existence, it's all finite and limited. But yet, the person who's truly evil, what God considered his enemy, he will not allow him to reap reward of his action in the world to come. He will pay him off in this world. So he should not have a share in the world to come. So when it comes the moment for him to leave this existence, and he arrives in this new existence, the world to come, account closed. The person goes into the oblivion. He has no worth whatsoever. But when he's here, he has a Rolls Royce for every day of the week. He lives in a mansion, one of a kind. Summer home, spring home, fall home, winter home, on every continent. He has something which outflies the Air Force One in terms of its amenities. Everybody envies this person. But little do people know that this is the final payoff. That when he checks out, there's nothing left. Because when you take something which has infinite worth and you condense it into 40, 50 years, how does it manifest itself? It's the ultimate immaterial. So what the person believes is reward, it's the ultimate punishment. Umanish l'ovri mitzvosav. Punishment doesn't only mean, God forbid, a person has an injury, a person has an illness, a person has pain. A punishment could be that when you live high on the hog, and it's like there's no tomorrow, and the whole world is envious of you, and you don't have a bad day in your life, that could be the ultimate punishment, because the cost factor of that is oblivion. That is going to be the end result of that type of payoff. So punishment doesn't mean something we sense to be painful. Punishment is reality of what the person's predicament is and what the end result will be. He rewards with good to those who observe his mitzvos. So how do we understand? Tzadik v'ravo, a person devoutly righteous, and he has serious health issues, he has financial issues, he has other issues. He has pain. It says he rewards good to those who observe his commandments. What's good? If you have a situation where the bank is willing to settle with you $1 on $1 billion, and you only have a few dollars, but by paying those few dollars that you have, and nothing's left afterwards, or very little is left, you relieve yourself of billions of dollars worth of debt. Is that good or bad? It may be painful to pay the debt, but you know what you're relieving yourself of? Debt, which is unheard of debt. And ultimately, it'll never come to haunt you. You're free and clear after that. When the Tsarik has any degree of suffering in this world, because nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. King Solomon says, Ein tzaddik b'aretz asher yastov lo yechto. There's no perfect tzaddik. So everybody has some level of debt. God prefers that you pay the debt in this world. So when you come to the world to come, you're debt free. And you're able to immediately bask in the divine radiance of God's presence, which is the ultimate. So what we see as negative is the ultimate positive. And what we see as positive and to be envied, God forbid, it's something which we should be aghast at understanding the consequences of receiving that kind of payment. Give you an example. Years ago, when the death penalty was in place, so the number of penitentiaries that had the death penalty, and some of them had, in New York State, you had the electric chair. California, you had the gas chamber. This is before they had the lethal injections, going back many years ago. So it was known that before they put a person to death, let's say in the electric chair, they would let him order any kind of meal he would want. It's his last meal. Could you imagine? He wants to order a meal from the most exclusive restaurant, 20-course meal. They'll rent him a tuxedo with the patent leather shoes, and they'll even put a pinky ring on him, for the photographer. And they take a picture of him indulging in this 20-course meal, and they even have a violinist there for him. Everybody sees this. They say, this is to be envied. This is something not to be believed. How many people are fortunate to be able to live this lifestyle? All of a sudden the camera shifts and it focuses on the electric chair with all the straps, the belt, the hood that they put on him. So his body should be contained and not be splattered all over the chamber where they're going to put him to death. You understand? So what's the value? As they said, that's the last song. That's the last hurrah. And there's no word to explain and define what that hurrah means, what the cost of that hurrah is. So again, we believe with absolute faith that God rewards goodness to those who observe his mitzvos. It doesn't have to be in this world. The world to come. I always say, the Tsarik never complains. I once had the discussion with our professed atheist, and he said to me, if God loves the Tsarik, why does Tsarik have such difficulty in his life, materially speaking, or other ways speaking? Why? He should provide him with whatever he needs. So I said to him, have you ever spoken to the tzaddik if he's happy? He may have pain, but does he have any issues with God? You who have a home in Manhattan, a home in Westchester, a home in Central America, and a home here and there, with a portfolio worth $500 million. Your problem is the tzaddik is denied. That's your problem. Have you ever discussed it with the tzaddik if he feels denied? The tzaddik sees God, he's in the dark ages. He's in the dark ages, but you realize he doesn't buy loot. He may be in the dark ages. You got it? Again, I believe with absolute faith, everything is meant for the goodness, regardless. He pays goodness to those who observe his mitzvahs. It's either payment of debt or a challenge, which even increases the value of the goodness. The other person, he may live high in the hog, but ultimately, that's the final payoff before he goes into the oblivion. I'm going to stop here. And I mentioned the class on the parsha is 1:00 to 2. It's a fast day, so I have to go pray a little earlier. I'll be back with Hashem's help.